Okay, we have people joining, which is wonderful. Awesome. Okay, let's do this. Let's get started. Just pulling up some of my stuff here. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking about how real photography of your team members and work environments reveal your employer brand. Our title is In Vivid Color, Real Employee Photography Reveals Your Employer Brand. And we are really thrilled to have so many individuals attending who are practitioners focused on developing the best culture content for your organizations. And we're happy to have a lot of our colleagues here as well. My name is Jessica McFadden, and I am the head of marketing at Stories Incorporated. Stories Inc. is a recruitment marketing content agency focused on uncovering employee stories to help organizations communicate their culture through media such as videos, blogs, social graphics, and the focus of today's webinar, real employee photography. And we are so proud to do this for some of the most progressive employer brands today. So I'm Jessica. I'm so glad you all are here. I'm a lifelong marketer. I have a content marketing and video comms focus, and I've got to bring a lot of my experience at in-house, at agencies, and now to Stories Inc., kind of bring all those hats together and wear them at once, helping share the stories of these great companies. And I'm going to invite our other panelists to introduce themselves too, beginning with my Stories Inc. colleague, Anna Lippy.
Hi, I'm Anna Lippy, Senior Content Strategist and Project Manager, and I've been with Stories Inc. for 4 years, partnering with clients to bring their culture to life through employee stories. And before Stories Inc., I spent almost 8 years at the advisory board company in campus recruiting and internal comms. Today, I'm excited to introduce one of our wonderful partners, Shannon of Exacquio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. For the past 20 plus years, I've worked in talent acquisition, employer brand, and employee communications in-house for companies such as Geico and CEB, which is now part of Gartner, and as a consultant for Exacquio. In all of this time, I've been part of many photo shoots, and I'm excited to share some lessons learned today with all of you. Before we get into that, though, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Christine.
Thank you. And hello to everyone. I'm Christine Gaspar, and I am the Chief Consulting Officer with Exacquio. And just a little bit of context about Exacquio, we are a full service employer branding and creative consulting firm. And we really like to talk about ourselves in that way because our approach to this work is about partnering with our clients to help understand and uncover those authentic employee stories that we can translate into that compelling photography that we're going to talk about today. I like to think of myself as a sort of tried and true consultant. I've done it both on the professional services side and then through many of my internal roles working for companies like Marriott, the Ritz-Carlton, Audi of America, etc. And so I'm back full circle working with Exacquio in a consulting capacity. And I'm really delighted to be part of this today and talk a little bit about the importance of storytelling, particularly for those who are in talent acquisition and who have roles of thinking about how to authentically bring your culture and the experience to life.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to pull up our deck. All right. Thank you so much. So we know our different, this is us, as you can see. We'll be sharing this with you also, so no need to, take screenshots or copious notes because we'll be sharing everything with you at the close. But before we really get started, we thought we'd start with something a little fun for all of us. The question is, how many times have you seen photos like this, or maybe these exact photos, on career sites and other communications? So maybe we've seen this smiling man before, the second guy over. Oh, there he is again. He works in a lot of places. We've seen people pointing at screens, lots of handshakes, lots of high fives. Working parents are usually wearing all white, right? Employees and team members stand single file, all in a line together. Oh, And here's somebody we recognize. Is Shannon, is that you?
That is. So fun fact, I moonlight as a stock photography model. And this photo was somewhat recently used by a major news outlet. I guess it sort of gives off tax season vibes. So to me, I think that there is a time and a place for stock photography. It's just not when it's activating your authentic employer brand. So thank you, Jessica. That's a fun little fact about me on the side when I'm not working.
I love it. And another thing that we might notice a lot when we're trying to communicate teamwork or diversity or other concepts, lots of hands, right? So our point, which I'm sure you've gotten, is stock photography. So obvious, it's real. It's unreal, right? It does not look real. So how can we better communicate real, unique, compelling employer brands to candidates, employees, and all of our critical audiences? And the answer is images of the real people who work in our organizations.
Now, these photos, these images are clear, professional, and beautiful. And they're also authentic. You can tell just by looking at them that they are real team members in their real workspaces, not sets. And instead of models, it's real moms working from home and real dads too. And instead of a staged or Photoshop lineup of people cut and pasted, real photography communicates the true diversity of your team members and the real relationships that exist between them. Authentic photography communicates the actual employee experience happening in your organization, and that allows candidates to picture themselves working at your company.
One of the things I think it's important for those of you kind of watching along with us now is think about how these photos have really spoken to you. Do they elicit a feeling? Do they make you kind of imagine even your own experience, your own world as an employee? And if so, that was really the intent, to kind of compare and see. The stock photography seems just that, but when you look at these authentic photos, you really see the experience. It helps you envision what it could look like, what it could be like to be part of this organization. And so hopefully you took a little bit of that away.
And that's why we're all here today. Shannon, Christine, and Anna today are going to be sharing with you why real employee images and stories are important to communicating a strong employer brand. We're going to be sharing best practices, considerations, and insider tips. And we're going to be providing step-by-step guidance for planning and activating the content and having your own employee photography program. We're here to help you with that, but if you'd like to run it on your own, we're going to give you a kind of a step-by-step how-to. We're also going to have Q&A, and so you can add any questions you may have for us in the Q&A option here on Zoom, and we'll try and answer as many as possible after we wrap up. And so I'm going to hand it over to Anna now.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So in the current Great Resignation that we've heard so much about, communicating employer brand has actually never been more important. So in all of the job listings and generic recruitment marketing messages, real employee stories and images cut through the noise. Candidates are most likely to engage with and respond to communications that show the real employee experience, and that includes the stories that your employer brand's photography tells.
Absolutely. And also, as you think about telling stories, the notion of being authentic or authenticity should be top of mind. To share with you, I have in my signature a quote that reads, and many of us do who work at Exactly, we put in quotes that are really personal to us. But mine says, "Who looks outside dreams, and who looks inside awakes." And I really thought about putting that a specific kind of quote in my signature that hopefully evokes or makes you think about what we do from the employer branding perspective. And oftentimes we as practitioners or other leaders in companies are tempted to look outside at trends, at what's happening, at what competitors are doing, maybe even trying to copy that, tweak it a little bit to make it their own. And that's so inauthentic. And so one of the things that I think is really important and we're going to talk about is that, maybe looking inside, what is your story? What are your employees? What are they doing? How are they acting and feeling? And capturing that in photography, because that speaks volumes to the employment experience and really draws in those who are looking at your organization for employment.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so fun that Stories and Exactly are coming together. So employer brand and culture, authenticity and content. At Exactly, we're known for helping our clients understand how employees experience their culture, the relationship those employees have with the organization as an employer, and building that strong employer brand foundation first. And then Stories, the team brings they're able to bring those strategies to life through that authenticity, that authentic content, including photos, video storytelling. And so I just so appreciate that we can all be here today collaborating on this important topic and sharing it with everyone.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go back and forth between sharing the screen. So thanks for your So today we're going to be having some actionable examples that we're going to be sharing throughout the presentation. There are partners that we've worked with where we've captured employee photography. And by going through and using these examples, we can really bring the strategies we've used to life, and we can show how to activate the employee photography to tell your brand story. And Shannon, she's going to tell us about this first one.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So I'm excited to share a glimpse into the work that we did together with Danone North America, and definitely want to send a thank you out to our client at Danone for allowing us to share the work today. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Danone, it is the parent company of Dannon, Danimals, and Activia yogurt, as well as Silk and Horizon milk products, and other amazing food brands. This is also an example of a company who had an existing employer brand foundation. So the employer brand strategy was there, and then Danone was ready to activate. So in November of 2020, Danone North America was looking for a partner to localize their existing global employer brand, One Planet, One Health by You. The plan was to pull that global employer brand through to their North American career site. And since the very heart of their brand, that by you, it's about their people, there was definitely a business need to gather that culture content in the form of authentic stories and photos. We can go to the next slide. Great, thank you. All right, so when Danone first partnered with us, I mentioned it was November 2020. Let's all just take a moment, remember where we were in the world, right? There was a lot going on. We were in the thick of those unprecedented times. There were shutdowns, schools were either still closed, maybe they were in hybrid mode, etc. So it was a very interesting time for Danone to be thinking about how do we localize and activate. And photo shoots in general, it's not just something that you wake up one day and say, let's have a photo shoot or let's have a video shoot. There's a lot of planning. So you can imagine there are a lot of conversations, a lot of planning that was going on. And it wasn't until actually February 2021 that we hosted their first on-site photo shoot. So in partnership, our goals were to capture real photography, those high quality images that would align to the employer brand, and also thinking about those images not only for the short-term career site, but also longer-term purposes, including, we took employee candidates because there's a vision that we could use that later, employee headshots because we perhaps wanted to share those back for LinkedIn headshots or with the employee. So a lot of all of those photos went into building their employee photo library. It was also really important to us, since we were in the midst of COVID, that we needed to keep everyone safe and healthy. So you can see here, we certainly were setting up in a really large space. So as you're scouting locations, that's really important. We'll talk about that in our step-by-step. We also were able to keep everyone safe and healthy by using a local crew, a smaller crew. People stayed masked. We were maintaining social distancing in these big open spaces. We were sanitizing in between each person and before and after the shoot. And we'll talk a little bit more about COVID protocols later in the session. And you can also see here, we've got a link to the Exactly blog. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, you can take a look there and read that story. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Anna to talk us through another client example.
Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. The Genoa photos result from our project together were awesome, and we loved partnering together on this project. And for a second actionable example, we'll be looking behind the scenes of Stories Inc.'s work with Dell Technologies. So Stories Inc. has been partnering with Dell Technologies since 2016, providing lots of culture content and many in-person photography and video days. And I'm honored to be the lead project manager for our work with Dell Technologies. So just for some background, the Dell Technologies brand was formed as a result of the 2016 merger between Dell and EMC Corporation. And with the launch of this new united brand, the global employer brand team needed to tell the Dell Technologies story and kind of showcase the company culture to attract candidates. So in partnership with Dell, we created recruitment marketing content campaigns that targeted specific personas. So things like women in tech, veterans, interns, and candidates for their postgraduate rotational programs. And then in 2019, they re-engaged Stories Inc. to create culture content that reflected the employee experience at both the global and regional levels. So as the lead content strategist and project manager, our photographers, videographers, and I uncovered compelling stories of Dell Technologies employees working in 9 global locations. And the result was a refreshed photo library of thousands of images of over 70 plus employees working across 9 offices and 5 continents, in addition to many videos that we created. And through this project, I had the amazing opportunity to truly travel the world and facilitate photo and video sessions ranging from Egypt to Singapore to Dell Technologies headquarters in Round Rock, Texas. And then in the past 2 years during the pandemic, we've continued serving as Dell Technologies' go-to employee photography partner, capturing photos of employees across the world in their home offices, the office itself, manufacturing centers, and more in the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. And based on Dell's needs, we specifically highlighted diversity and inclusion, working from home in the time of COVID, accommodations for differently abled team members, volunteerism, social impact, and recycling, including some of Dell's nonprofit partners, and a focus on manufacturing and facilities. So thanks to our work together, Dell Technologies now has a massive multi-use content library for all recruitment marketing stakeholders to use. And this content fills Dell Technologies' external channels with engaging and relevant employee stories and images that really highlights Dell's diversity and their true social impact.
So now let's get to the step-by-step action plans for an employer branding photography content project. And I'm going to hand it to Christine. Christine, what is the first step practitioners should take?
That's a great question. What I would say is the first step that you don't want to take is start with picking out locations and, what are we going to wear, and are we going to do it in an office? Might we do the photo shoot, out in the production line if that's our line of business, or, if we have global operations, maybe we want to do the shoot, one of our interesting, sort of international locations if we were US based. And all those things are wonderful and they're fun and they are appropriate. But what I would ask is please first stop and think about the strategy. Think about the anchor of which those very compelling photos are going to tell. Really, they're just the expression of that authentic employer brand. And so at Exactly, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is helping every employer, every client that comes to us to really authentically uncover what is their employment truth. Every employer has the ability to tell their story and to uncover what makes them unique. And we have very specific approaches that we use to get underneath of not just the overall company, but get inside of each employee, understand what motivates them, understand what they value about the work experience. And through that data, we help to uncover what are those employment truths. And those truths translate into a story that we tell. How do we capture that through photography, partnering with such companies as Stories Inc. to really bring that to life? A couple of other things to think about after you've really set your strategy is making sure that you have your partners aligned. Again, the output of the work doesn't always reflect what you need to do internally to bring it to life. So think about partnering with, of course, PR and marketing within your organization. Think about partnering as well with your marketing or branding team, because your employment brand and the expression of it really should complement and connect to your consumer or your master brand. You shouldn't see a sort of a disconnect both in photo treatment and placement, but also just sort of tone. They really should be complementary mechanisms. But certainly from an employment perspective, that photography and that point of view should be very human-centered, very employee first, but again, making sure they're complementary. Also, you want to think about, sort of the different kinds of work that you perform within your organization. So when you were bringing that employer brand to life through photography, consider all aspects of the work environment or work experience. Do you have a mix of employees that are based perhaps in more of a, non-office environment, whether it could be, production, or maybe their work is outside. It could be construction or lawn care. Maybe you even have employees that, are in call centers or things like that. So really stopping to make sure you have that sound employer brand strategy. And then you really think about the different and varying types of employment experiences that are true within your company and how you can capture those through compelling photography.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And so now step 2 we're going to get to is after you've set the foundation of your employer brand strategy, and there's so much involved there, but now we are going to start talking about photography a little bit more finely. The next step is to develop your activation strategy for using the photos. So Anna, can you take us through that?
Sure. So before heading into a day of taking pictures, there's some things to think through. So first, your overall content needs. What channels do you need images for? So your career site's probably a no-brainer, but where else can you use a refreshed photo library? So things like digital ads, brochures, landing pages, embedded in job descriptions, and for sites like Glassdoor. There's also typically other needs for employee imagery throughout the organization too. And so as you're developing your strategy and approach, you can reach out to your internal communications and marketing team members to see where else they'd want to leverage employee photos. So this can be for things like your intranet, internal career sites, benefits communications, annual reports, and lots more.
Yes. And so after that, just as working with other departments, as you mentioned, is so critical to developing your creative concept, you also must take into account the overall brand guidelines to make sure things are truly aligning with the employer brand. Anna, can you share with us your insights there?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. So companies often have clear brand guidelines for their photography, and at Stories Inc., we really incorporate all brand guidelines into the employee story content project plan. So this is another good time to bring in your marketing department into the conversation. So you don't want to have to do this in a silo or have marketing 6 months down the line come back and say that photos aren't alive with the overall brand. That's not fun. And so I'll kind of dive into this Dell Technologies example. So when we were planning photography for Dell Technologies, their unique brand guidelines really impacted every photo we planned. So for our photography during the pandemic, for example, we encourage participants to wear anything that shows their personality. So fun accessories, things like that. And given Dell's brand colors, wearing kind of a bright solid color, especially blue, is always great. So the brand guidelines also include different size images they might need. So whether it's wide angle photos for banners or tall and thin shots for skyscraper digital ads. And knowing all of this going into photography day will really make sure you get exactly what you need for your final use case. And brand guidelines can also include what you don't want. So for instance, in our photography with Dell Technologies, we generally avoid strange or extreme cropping, harsh or low lighting. So overly posed, again, we're going for that authenticity that we discussed earlier. We avoid backs of heads and unhappy faces for obvious reasons. So the best employee story content, including employee photography, really comes from natural connections with team members, and the stories that employees tell about their work and their experience in the company reveal the real culture. So candidates, employees, and consumer audiences will really respond to photography that is authentic. And our methodology requires us to really get to know our employee storytellers and photo subjects, and therefore the employee experience from their point of view. So in addition to telling stories that show corporate culture, we really care about lifting up employees and making sure that they feel comfortable in the process. So we feel a responsibility to tell and show their employee experience in a way that makes them feel proud of the images that we captured. And that's why feedback of our work from employee storytellers means so much to us. So in the Dell Technologies example, I received dozens of emails with smiley emojis from participants just saying how much they enjoyed the experience, and that just meant so much to me. And in this work, we work with both the talent marketing, internal communications, and employees themselves to communicate the real employee experience, as well as the team or department experience. And we can't talk about employee experience in 2022 without addressing the remote employee experience, but I'll share more about that in step 7. So Dell Technologies uses the photo content not only to communicate the real employee experience to candidates, they also use the photos in their corporate, consumer, and internal communications. So as pictured here, Dell used the photography through their most recent annual report and social impact reports. And as part of our social impact photo project, these images were used in their Progress Made Real and Diversity and Inclusion reports. And as transparency and accountability were key themes of the report, real photos of employees brought their goal of authenticity to life, and I really think the photos turned out beautifully. And uniquely, these content libraries that the Dell Technologies employer brand team builds are accessed and used by departments actually throughout the company. So the original photography of real employees and workspaces, B-roll footage, and stories we capture from employees are really repurposed as both consumer-facing and internal content, and this extends kind of well beyond what our initial client even intended.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because oftentimes when our clients are coming to us, they're thinking about the external, like, oh, our career site needs to be updated or refreshed or relaunched. But I think it's an opportunity for employer brand leaders to say, hey, how can we take this work and maybe build bridges and speak with our internal communication partners to reach out to the marketing team and say, we're working on this. And they're open your aperture, if you will, to say, how can we get more mileage out of the photos and pulling them into other touch points that are important to employees, benefits, open enrollment. You mentioned working with internal communications, employee engagement surveys. So I think talking with your colleagues and really showing them how these real employee photos can be used can also help them reinforce the culture and recognize employees internally as well, which is really important.
Yes.
Next, we're going to bring it all together. I think what's really what's really important in this step is, if we think about the journey we've been taking you on with the various steps, making sure you have that compelling EB, your employer brand strategy articulated, thinking about activation, thinking about the locations and, where you might want to capture those real authentic experiences. And now you need to actually identify the employees that you're going to photograph in those authentic locations. And there are a couple of things to consider here. I've spent most of my career in the HR space specifically. And so I can't take that part of me and that part of my brain out when we're thinking about how to bring to life the employer branding using employees. A couple of things that I think would be really helpful for you guys to consider. First and foremost, obviously you always want to partner with your HR business partner, as well as business leaders throughout the various departments that you think you're going to be selecting employees from. Obviously, you want to think about the diversity in the mix of the employees that you're selecting. Employees who have long tenure with the company, employees who might be newer to the company, employees who've had various roles and responsibilities throughout the company, employees who do different kinds of work in different kinds of geographies and locations. So when they're in those spaces that you're capturing, they're authentic to that. So you wouldn't want to put an employee who typically works on an assembly line and have them in an office shot, because it's just not going to feel real to them. And you really want to just capture that authenticity. Also, you want to keep in mind that the employees that you're selecting to participate, that they're also just kind of good employees, right? They're in good standing. They've been great contributors to the company. The worst thing that you can do is, you know, have your list of employees that you think might be great, not review it with HR, their manager, and then find out they're having some performance issues, or maybe they've even given their notice, right? And we're, you know, working towards shooting and incorporating them into a photo shoot. The other tip that I would leave you with is it doesn't hurt to go on LinkedIn. Do a quick search on your employees, right? And see if they've got their resume posted, see if they have even like a banner saying open for new opportunities or open to work. Because again, you want to make sure that you're identifying employees who really represent the culture, the work environment, the authenticity. You're going to keep hearing that word from me, but that authenticity of the employment experience. And again, as you heard Shannon just mention, the photos can have multiple purposes, both internally and externally, right? So you want those internal employees who might see those photos, for example, on your open, you know, enrollment site or flyer or mailer that goes out, or on your, you know, when you're taking your engagement survey and they might put some of those photos there. You want other employees internally to look and go, oh yeah, you know, that's, you know, so-and-so, and oh yeah, they've been with us for a while, and not look at those photos and go, why did they pick them? Or how is that person, you know, on this photo or using to promote this kind of company asset? So keep some of that in mind, that you get a lot of mileage out of those photos, both externally and internally, and you want it to resonate with both audiences.
Wonderful. And I know we talked about authenticity a lot. And on this point, I wanted to talk about the storyteller prep process. So I take this storyteller prep process really seriously. It's really important that our participants and storytellers know what to expect and really feel comfortable ahead of and the day of the photos. So I typically will host a call where I go over details of an upcoming photo session. So including things like logistical, when and where to meet the photographer, how the day will unfold, what to expect, what to wear, answering their questions and just making them feel comfortable with our team. We usually advise that they, you know, wear what they typically wear to work on the more polished end. And so that can really, you know, of course, be different for depending on what role they're in. That can be business dress, business casual, or a uniform. So for instance, when photographing nurses, we want to make sure they're in their scrubs if that's what they would wear to work. On a recent shoot we did with nurses, some of the nurses actually made sure to have their hair cut close to the shoot day. So we know that this is all very important for participants. I've even had participants text me their outfit choices the night before. And so we also advise them, you know, generally to wear solid colors, which look great on camera, and to avoid plain white. We often ask our photo subjects and storytellers to kind of bring what they would bring for their typical work. So whether that's a phone, laptop, things that would sort of mimic working shots. And I love this one, which is personal and professional mementos. So on the professional side, that can be awards, pictures, certificates, plaques, mugs, anything that they've sort of had as recognition or that has their company logo on it. And then on the personal side, we've had our storytellers bring in family photos, running shoes, anything that relates to their hobbies or interests. And photos with these items can really pop and kind of show the personality of our storyteller. As for locations, we typically work with the internal point of contact to plan out the best locations that they would like to capture. So we think about things like the company schedule for spaces, any day of circumstance like construction or maintenance, approvals needed for work sites, if facilities needs to give us help with access. The traffic level of the area is another thing. So will photography be disrupted by people walking through? Or maybe we want kind of extras in the background for a place like a cafeteria. And there are the photo sites easy for the employees to get to. Will there be enough room for everyone to be comfortable? So the employees, photographers, and project team. Also thinking about locations, how far one location is from another. Do we have enough time planned in for movement? All of those type things. And ideal filming locations have pops of color, depth in the background, and where there's some movement in the background to kind of show that visual interest. And then on the day of and before the photo sessions, We always build in time to preview and scout locations so we know what we're working with and what the best locations might be.
And we were just on a call actually earlier today with a client setting up a photo shoot for next month. And we were talking about exactly this, scouting locations, what is the shot list, and thinking about those environment shots. Not everyone is working from home. And there's a huge percentage of our workforce, especially our high volume hourly workforce across various industries that are in the office or in the plant, on the floor. And so showing people what the workplace looks like is going to help give them that sense of place and visualize where they might be spending a majority of their time. But it's also, as people are returning to work or job seekers are looking for what's next for them, those environment shots I think are also really important to see, to picture yourself there. Can you picture yourself there? And it's also an opportunity for employers to say, let's highlight some of the things that make our space, that make us unique. So you saw in that picture that we just had up, those were some Danone pictures with the fully stocked fridge with all of their great products. So it's a really fun time, I think, to think about when you're mapping locations. What do you want to put on your shot list? So it's nothing to take lightly. I think it's a really important exercise to go through.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we work with team members, kind of to your point, Shannon, to capture a real look at their hybrid, if they're not at home, if they're hybrid or not at work, their hybrid working and living environments. So as pictured here for Dell Technologies. And I love these work from home photos. So when photographing employees at home, it's important to capture employees in their real work from home situations. So not overly staged. That can be working from their desk, sofa, kitchen table. There's some clutter that's real and communicates the actual employee experience, of course, being mindful that it's not too much. And we always say pets and children are welcome. So we use these external environmental settings beyond their home setup to help tell a richer story of the team member and their interests and their dynamic life outside of work. Plus, we recommend showing the full spectrum of their work and home lives, which we know has been really meshed together in this environment. And that, again, includes family members, children, pets, and these end up just being wonderful photos.
So step 8, addressing COVID concerns. I think depending on where we're at in the world, where we live, what the environment is, we're all still experiencing COVID in different ways. And I mentioned I was on a call this morning to plan a photo shoot. I'm headed to a client photo shoot in April, and it was really important for us to have that conversation and know what their latest protocols are as it relates to their sites. And for this particular client, the employees are no longer wearing masks. However, protocol is anyone who's not an employee that's coming on site is still required to wear a mask. And we're actually sending our vaccination cards as well. So just really important to know what is the current state of COVID requirements as it relates to your office locations, your facilities, because we're seeing that it still varies from state to state, county to county, employer to employer.
And, the site we're of course deferring to whatever the client or partner site, but the Stories Inc. team is SafeSet certified, and we're constantly updating our safety protocols for the geographic locations and needs of the day. And so when we follow up with the presentation, we'll also include our SafeSet recommendations for procedures in the follow-up. So hopefully you'll find that helpful too.
All right, so now you've got all of your photos, your library is built. Step 9, now what? What happens? We've got to activate our content and come take it further here. So some things that I'd like to share with you as we finish up our step-by-step here is just thinking about how do you get the most mileage from your employees. So curating the library is great, but you'll want to make sure that people who communicate on behalf of your organization as an employer have access to them, know how to use them. Anna mentioned earlier brand guidelines. Part of our job as employer brand professionals, HR professionals, is to educate others. And I would encourage you to think about, how do you host a training session, a lunch and learn? How do you debut the new photos? And show your colleagues where and how to download them, provide examples of when, where, how to use them, and any other steps to ensure that your teams are empowered to bring your brand to life in a way that aligns with your brand guidelines. And then also, speaking of brand guidelines, thinking about your photos from a brand governance and a photo management perspective. There's kind of some steps that I think about when I'm thinking about brand governance. What is the policies in place? So your brand guidelines, what's the process? Who are the people? And then my tools and tech. So how do you get the photos out to people that need them? But then how do you ensure the photos are still representing the brand? How often do you check those photos to ensure that they're still aligned with the brand, that you know whether or not to keep those photos in circulation? How often do you check to see if employees are still employed? Do you delete images? Who's in charge of all of this management? I think so from a photo management perspective, you got to get really clear on how you're going to manage that moving forward. So the photo shoot's just the beginning, but you'll want to think about your photos and your brand definitely with a longer term perspective.
Yeah, those are great tips. And here are some examples of ways that Dell Technologies uses photography across their many channels. So photography of employees are typically ideal for organic and paid social media posts. And again, the content libraries of team member photos really serve as an asset hub used across the global organization.
So I have found this so helpful in so many ways, and we have gone through 9 major steps on hosting your employee photography project. Of course, there's so much behind them, especially in the beginning with establishing your strategy foundation or planning your creative activation strategy. There's so much involved here, but we'll be sharing this with you, and hopefully it's a good graphic for your use. I'm going to stop sharing because now we have some Q&A. So we actually wondered if someone would ask this first question that came in from Natalia. Natalia asks, what do you do when employees that have been photographed leave the company? And I know that Christine and Shannon had some great tips on what they've done before.
Yeah, we can tag team, Shannon and I think. So I'll put on, my hat from coming from internal on the HR function. Keep in mind that we talked about earlier in this presentation. So authenticity, right? So the employees that you're capturing, it's about them and their portrayal of authentic work experiences, and to some extent less about the actual employee. Number 2, making sure you work with your legal team, that you get any kind of disclosure signed, anything like that, that you're really in the clear of using their likeness for company promotion or activities, even after they've departed. So I don't think that that's a concern. And I think the upside of having employees really portray the work that they're doing outweighs that risk of, well, what happens if they leave or they, are no longer here a year or 2 years from now? Shannon, what would you add?
Definitely outweighs the risk. And I mentioned brand governance and photo management. So I spent over a decade at Geico, and we hosted photo shoots almost every year, every summer. And part of the reason was to address those things, like what if people leave? And we also had a cadence. So every year we had the photo shoot, we reviewed all of our print materials. Print materials, you just have to get a longer shelf life out of them. And then digital materials, so career site, digital ads, we reviewed on a more regular basis. Career site was reviewed quarterly, and if employees left, photos were taken down and replaced with additional photos from our employee photo library. With one caveat, if someone left and it was for egregious reasons, we were notified by HR and that person was removed immediately. But if someone left on good standing, it would just fall into that regular cadence of updating and managing our photos.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know that's something that we hear at Stories a lot, and thank you for also having some great answers on that. we have another question, and this is from Felipe. I'm going to have Anna answer this one if that's cool. Felipe asks, how would you describe the look and feel of a premium brand, and what elements are usually trends and which ones aren't? And I know that Anna had some great insights as to what are kind of the elements of a leading employer brand guideline set.
That's a great question. I think what comes to mind initially for me, again, is that authenticity. And so I know that came up a lot through the session, but I think photos and branding that just feels unique and that you wouldn't be able to see at any other, in any other company's photography or website. And I think also quality really matters here. And so having just really high quality, beautiful, colorful images, I think really make a difference. And then that you would see and not just think it's any generic brand, but you would sort of know it feels like that particular brand, whether it's the environments, the colors. So for Dell, for example, blue being a prominent theme. So whether people are in the color blue backgrounds, you're kind of seeing some of those elements kind of intentionally woven together. But it's a really good question.
And then I know that you had some insight too about like how you have I know that you're there on site for these photography projects, about like the gaze and the types of expressions. Or is there anything that you have to like let people know like where to look in the eye line? I know that in the end, that is such a big part when you're looking at the photography after it's all over.
Yeah, we get a variety, and sometimes it depends on the clients. It always depends on the client's brand guidelines. So some like kind of the arms crossed looking at the camera, some want just like more in action, not people smiling, but we generally do a mix. So we'll do more traditional kind of headshots looking at the camera, group photography, so that can be more in action where people are talking to each other and smiling, and the photo feels like you just stepped into the middle of a conversation. And so typically on a photo day, we're doing, again, individual and small groups, so you are getting that mix. And our photographers are really excellent about getting our participants and storytellers just to feel really comfortable. So it's not feeling like a elementary school like portrait, but it's feeling like a really kind of authentic, natural, just capturing their work environment. And I think it shows in the photos.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you all. Thank you to everyone. We're at 1:47, so we just went over a little bit. I don't think that's so bad, right? We've had amazing, about 50 people have joined us live today, which is wonderful. It's such like a great, endorsement that you would share your time with us during this really busy season. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Shannon and Christine and Anna, as employer brand strategists and experts in this field, how you came on and shared some of your most wonderful advisory with us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to share our screen so that we can just show you our contact info so that you can connect with us. Is there anything anyone else would like to say in closing as we wrap this up? Well, thank you so much. You can definitely connect with us all here. Did somebody have something to say? I didn't mean to speak over you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you to you, Jessica. Everyone on the webinar doesn't know how much work, right, that goes on behind the scenes here. And Jessica is truly just such a fantastic partner. And I just want to say thank you to you for pulling all of us together and bringing all of us together.
Oh, well, the entire Stories team appreciates so much, the entire Exactwio team. We love working together, whether it's on a webinar or on a big photography project. It's always an honor. And if you'd like to reach out to any of us, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can reach out to our companies there, and we'll follow up with some information from both of our companies that help bring your employer brands to life. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. All right.